You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by Knacks. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
The New York Times summarizes the focus of our conversation today the best. Are they gas stations that serve food or restaurants that pump gas? A new photography book, well, not so new now, explores the lore of these restorative community rest stops. We're going to talk to the author about why she made this book and what it all means. So joining us today is Kate Medley. She's a photojournalist and author of the book, Thank You, Please Come Again. It is on my bookshelf now, and we're going to talk about this book for a little bit. So thank you for joining us today, Kate.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeff. I've followed your work for a long time, so it's an honor to be on the show.
Well, it was pretty cool to see in the book the reference to Knacks, so you weren't kidding. How would you describe your book?
Sure, yeah. It's a book of photography, a coffee table style book of photography that I made over the course of 10 years traveling across the American South. I looked at gas stations as a lens for a way to make documentary work of the South, because these spaces are, as you well know, one of the few spaces that really everyone passes through. I think of our society as being increasingly polarized. We self-segregate by way of interest and religion and socioeconomic status. And yet we all still pass through convenience stores and gas stations on a somewhat regular basis. And I felt like that was something we should really celebrate.
So was the difference, been taking pictures for a long time, and you have other photojournalism interests, but when you first said, I think there's a book here, was there anything that changed from your initial premise on what you want to do and the story you want to tell and what ultimately showed up in the pages of your book?
That's a great question. For starters, when I began this project and when I decided to pursue it as a book, many people thought I was totally bonkers. Why would I invest so much time in gas stations, these humble places that they are not a destination for many people. They are just a place that we pass through. So for some, it took some convincing that we should hold these places up as something to celebrate. And I got to give credit to my publisher, The Bitter Southerner. They are a media outfit based in Georgia, and they started about 10 years ago in 2013, shortly after I started this project. And they took a chance on publishing this as an article back in 2013. I think at that point, the article they published was all about gas station food in the Mississippi Delta. And, I think we were all surprised at the reaction to the body of work, in that, some people were like, yes, you nailed it. And others were like, oh God, you couldn't have gotten this more wrong. You went to the wrong place for the best fried chicken. But at the end of the day, there was incredible engagement. People had opinions. And I always take that as a good sign. So when the Bitter Southerner started publishing books just a couple years ago, they came to me and asked if I wanted to collaborate on this as a book. And so I've been working on it for about 10 years, but we've been working on making this book just for a couple years. And I think we've all been surprised at the reaction that the book's gotten, surprised and delighted.
And I've also interacted with some of the folks at the Bitter Southerner. And for the record, for other folks, they're not really all that bitter. It's just a cool thing.
They're some of the kindest people that you'll ever come across, actually.
So there's the subhead, if you will. That was the official title of your book, but it's called a photographic road trip. And we feel at Knacks, we own road trips. Last year, we did one with Stafford Sheridan, who's from Mississippi, and Al A. Bear, who's known as the gas station gourmet. We drove around areas in New Orleans. This year, somebody else who has praised you, Stephanie Stuckey, says we got to hit the road again. We're thinking about maybe going to Mississippi and stopping by and visiting some of the places that are closer to Stafford. The places in your book look like they look delicious. You have a gift of making fried chicken look three-dimensional in a two-dimensional book. But what really, I've been to a lot of places, and I intend to go a lot more that are gas stations with great food. I hadn't been to any of these places. So how did you find them? What was your ability to say, okay, I'm just going to drive around, or did you solicit all kinds of recommendations along the way?
Both. So when I first started this project about 10 years ago, I put out a simple call on social media and just said, what's the best gas station food in the Mississippi Delta? And, Jeff, I thought I would get 2 or 3 answers. And, maybe I got 100 answers. And again, it wasn't go eat fried chicken at the Double Quick in Greenwood. It was go to the Double Quick on Churton Street in Greenwood, but only on Tuesdays before 11, because that's when Debbie's cooking the fried chicken and hers is the best. And then someone would counter that and say, not the one on Churton Street. You got to go to Main Street where Tanya's cooking the fried chicken. And so again, back to this, people had such distinct opinions. They had really thought about this a lot. And so as I continued my journey, thankfully, people have started sending me unsolicited suggestions, which I always welcome. And so when I set out, especially when I was trying to finish the book on a deadline, I would often set out for a day of field work and have one location that I felt pretty confident about. And that had usually come, as a recommendation. And then, probably 75% of these places I just sort of stumbled across on the way, and it was more of a slam on the brakes type situation. And I would, I'd pull over and open that little glass door and you hear the bell jingle. And there's this great mystery about what will you find inside? You don't have that mystery when you walk into a Subway, for instance. When you walk into a Subway, you know what it'll smell like. You know what's on the menu. You know what it'll taste like. You know how much it'll cost. When you walk into a gas station, though, especially in these rural areas around the country, you can tell so much about a community by way of, who's behind the register, how are you received, what's on the menu, who's hanging out, who's the 2:00 crowd that's still hanging out that afternoon drinking coffee, what's on the community bulletin board. To me, Jeff, these became signs that tell me, where in the world am I, and what do these people value? And so it kind of became my way of discovering these small communities.
So one of the things that we noticed in we visited half a dozen places in a 2-day period in outside of Alexandria, that area of Louisiana. And what we noticed was oftentimes the grimier is, I don't know if that's the right word, but the more loved and worn down the place was on the outside, the more spectacular the food was on the inside. And there almost seemed to be a direct ratio between a place that has stood the test of time, and then you go inside and you see why it stood the test of time.
Exactly. I mean, you don't necessarily want to get your fried chicken from someone who's cooking from a skillet they bought yesterday. You want them cooking in a skillet that has, 10 years of grease, that's well seasoned, if you will. And so, maybe that's a term that you can use to describe some of these places. They are well seasoned.
Well seasoned is a whole lot better than grimy, and I'm the communications guy. So one of the other things we noticed is we had to double lunch and double dinner because, hey, we have to. There's something we have to stop at. So lunchtime is not usually the best time for outdoor shoots. Skies overhead. So you're dealing with photography, and there's hours in the morning and the evening. How do you manage all that? And how do you manage, okay, I'm going to hit 3 places today, and I'm going to somehow not have 3 lunches? That was a lot of questions there.
As you well know, this work is not for the faint of heart or the light stomach. There were many days with 3 lunches. One of my goals was to, try all the food that I was photographing and celebrating. I wasn't necessarily part of the Clean Plate Club at every stop, but it was important to me, when someone takes the time to cook a meal for you, I definitely wanted to try it all. And as to your question about doing photography throughout the day. I work as a journalist when I'm not making this book, and we work under all sorts of constraints every day. Our job is to document the news, and the news is rarely happening at the hour. So some of what we do is, we learn tricks to sort of harness the light best we can. Gas stations and convenience stores are not known for their glamorous lighting, but there are definitely ways to work within those environments to, shine good light, shine flattering light on the cashier or the cook. So I definitely employed all of those techniques in the making of this book because, to your point, many days I was visiting 5 places, for instance. So yeah, we were packing it in for sure.
And also, it's not just having 5 meals; they're generous meals. And they're usually
they're high caloric meals.
Well, they're generous in size, and they're even more generous once you strike up a conversation with them. And then it's just like, here, try this, and it's a lot. To-go box, and who can we share this with in the hotel tonight?
There are many to-go boxes in the backs of rental cars, that's for sure.
So you had a foreword that was written by somebody that just kind of set the tone for what the pictures and the stories look like in your book. And my favorite line is repeated twice. My favorite restaurant served gas. My favorite restaurant served gas. And have any of those lines resonated where people, you already mentioned had been, when you're developing the book, had all kinds of opinions. Are they still throwing in those opinions, whether about a different area of the country or somebody that you missed in this first round? Are
they ever? Well, to start, the foreword to the book is written by an incredible writer who's originally from Mississippi. His name is Kiese Lehman. And he wrote about a Junior Food Mart gas station in Forest, Mississippi, which is a mostly agricultural part of the state. And, he really summed it all up with that line that you mentioned, restaurants that serve gas. God bless him, he really knocked it out of the park with his foreword to the book, in that you read these pages and you can smell the Junior Food Mart and you can taste the Junior Food Mart. I will be forever indebted to him for bringing his both creativity and sensory way of writing to this project. To your question of, are there places I miss? Oh boy, gosh, this book features about 75 places from a body of work that I think I documented about 150 service stations in 11 states, and it barely scratches the surface. I have a spreadsheet that is hundreds of service stations long that I'll be chipping away at for from here to eternity. And that's just in the South. And I know that your focus is much broader than the South. And so, I have gotten that question of, well, is this a Southern phenomena? And I would be interested in your answer. I would argue that the South does gas station food particularly well. I would also argue that many rural places around the country and probably around the world do gas station food particularly well. This is these entrepreneurs are very resourceful. They are serving the community. Many of these areas are food deserts. They're the only commercial enterprise for 20 miles. And so they have to be so much more than the gas station. They have to sell hot food that tastes good, that is inexpensive and portable. And so they figure out a way.
And we'd see places that also sold farm supplies. Towns of 700. It was the gas station. It was the restaurant. It was the hangout. It was the grocery store. It was the convenience store. It was the as I said, the farm supply store. Yeah. It was everything.
Right.
And it is really impressive when, and I agree with you, it is largely the South, and it is particularly rural areas. And boy, somebody needs to get an RV and drive around a lot more. Combine the hundreds of stores that I know about, that Stafford knows about, that Stephanie knows about, that you know about. Maybe we have a couple more coffee table books in us with all of us working together.
I mean, I'm ready to go on a road trip with that group. Stephanie and Stafford and you, let's go.
Well, we might take you up on that. But I know when you look at the pictures, you really are appreciative of every stop you visit. And there's a memory and something that is just indelible that'll stick around a while. But is there any picture or any stop in particular that was just, I wish that this picture is amazing. I want everybody to see this picture. And was there an experience where I really wish everybody would go to this place?
There are many, for certain. I think of a couple places. This is not a book about gas. It's not a book about food. This is a book about people. And there are a number of people who I had the good fortune of visiting and revisiting throughout the course of this project. Most of those are in Mississippi, which is largely where this project began. I think about the Campbell family in Indianola, Mississippi at Betty's place. They're right around the corner from the B.B. King Museum. Betty used to be a cook for B.B. King, and now she and her family, her siblings, her nieces and nephews, her children are all part of this restaurant effort where they sell soul food. Down the road from them is the Fratesi family. The Fratesis first immigrated to the U.S. from Italy in, I think, 1904, and they brought their family's recipes with them. And so at Fratesi's in Leland, Mississippi, you can get gas, you can get ammunition, you can get live bait, you can also get a fried olive po' boy, you can get their house-cured meats, you can get, fine Italian cheeses. It's totally remarkable. So those are two that I am grateful to have returned to many times over the last 10 years. But, I also think about the Sissy family at St. Louis Savours in the back of a Circle K in Greensboro, North Carolina. They came to the U.S. from Senegal, and they are serving Senegalese food in what used to be the Dunkin' Donuts on the side of the Circle K. I think about the Patel family in nearby Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where, on most days you go in there and you get a regular like chicken tenders, barbecue, fries, potato logs. But on Tuesdays, Mrs. Patel makes the samosas that her mother-in-law taught her to make. And so that, they're bringing back some of these family recipes from her growing up years in India and serving the only Indian food for miles. And so it's these stories that I think really can tell us a lot about who we are as Americans, who we're becoming, what is the future of these communities if we really listen closely.
And of course, what you just described are people that have been around generations and people that have been around relatively recently. And they both found a way to be ingrained in the community, and that way is the service station.
Remarkably so. Yeah. I mean, there's a long tradition of immigrant populations specifically entering the U.S. workforce by way of the food economy. And I would argue that especially in the South, gas stations fit squarely within that. And yeah, we're lucky.
Mm-hmm. So when I started, I quoted the New York Times, and that's one of many accolades that you've gotten since this book came out in late 2023, right around the time of the NAC show. We were a little busy, so we didn't have a chance to connect then. But so the book is published. There's a publicist that puts out the word. You're not sure what's going to happen, and then stuff happens. Can you describe what that whole experience was like?
Wow. It's been incredibly humbling and honestly sort of hard to digest. So, it's been a great experience working with the Bitter Southerner. I went into this collaboration with them knowing that, they're very new to book publishing. They're still sort of finding their way and figuring it out. And honestly, that was one of the things that was attractive to me about going with them. I think they created this beautiful book that their designer, Dave Whitling, just knocked it out of the park beyond my wildest dreams. It's heavy, it's big, it's bright, it's eye-catching. But, the Bitter Southerner is not Penguin. They're not Chronicle Books. They don't have a robust PR effort. And So my expectations were minimal. And like you said, the book came out, I think, a couple weeks before Christmas. And it, started getting some quiet attention here and there. And the media that it's gotten this year in 2024, I never could have imagined. It's been a wild ride. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, and along the way, I'd get something forwarded. It's like, have you heard about this book? And it's like, yeah, I need to talk to her. And it's like, did you hear this on NPR? And it's like, yeah, I need to talk to her. So glad we're talking. I have this book sitting right on my, side desk here in the office, and it's great to see people walk by and go, what's that book? And give a chance to tell a little story about that. There's some great stories in there in terms of just images of looking at people, looking at the stores. It's a great celebration of our industry, and you're absolutely right. It's not about the structure. It's not about the liquid that's sold outside. It's about the people, and it's about the community and the culture that is around this place on both ends of the counter.
I mean, I think you could make an easy argument that these spaces, in many instances, are the centerpiece to the community. They are the glue that holds that fabric together, and I think they haven't gotten enough attention.
So, is there, now that you're a gas station, convenience store, service station expert, is there anything that you'd say to anybody out there, whether they have one store or whether they have 100 stores, that they might want to think about that to tell their story like the way you've been able to tell many of these stories?
Well, that's an interesting question. Is your question about what I would say to the proprietor of one of these places? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Is it social media? Is it how do you get people to know you're around and stay in business?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, what really impressed me about the places that I featured in the book is that they have found a way to be a reflection of their community, whether that is, the food that they're serving or, what they're stocking in the store. They have found a way to cater to the specific needs of the people who they serve. And, I think when you're doing that, that's so much. I mean, that is very resource intensive, and I don't mean to suggest otherwise. But when you're doing that, that is 80% of what you're asking, of what you need to be doing. Mm-hmm. Social media is great, and sort of the tools of getting the word out there are forever shifting. But I think if you know who your customer base is, and you're talking to them and asking them what they need and meeting them halfway to that, that's what makes these places special.
I agree. And for those who want to pick up a copy of the book or find out more about your other work, how might they learn more?
Sure. So the book is for sale by way of my publisher at thebittersoutherner.com.
And again, they are very, very nice people. They're not at all bitter.
Kindest people.
Kind, very kind.
And it is also for sale at independent bookstores around the country. And if you want to find out more about my work, it's on my website at katemedley.com or on various social medias. So yeah, I would love to hear people's recommendations. Project is ongoing. So I hope people will show me the way.
Well, it's always nice to talk to somebody who's had multiple lunches in a gas station in a given day. And we really appreciate for what you've done to celebrate our industry and the communities that it cultivates. So thank you for joining us today, Kate.
Yes, Jeff. Thank you for all of the work that you and your team have already done that helped pave the way for this. And I hope that occasion comes where we can have 3 fried chicken lunches sometime soon.
Well, we may see you down the road.
Hope so.
And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.